Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for two reasons. I want to thank you for looking at the packed agenda here at ITV and decided that you wanted to come to a business travel session. I find that it's not oftentimes that people think that business travel is interesting or sexy or innovative. So thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we can prove them wrong. I also want to thank you for taking the time to find this room. It took me about 45 minutes to find this room, and I thought I was going to be late. So thank you so much for not only deciding to come, but also for making your way here. Anyone know what this is? It's actually a day at the office, not Pokemon. So this is a picture that's real. It wasn't staged. And it was from a coworker of mine that caught me catching Pokemons at work. Now, I'm a 33-year-old man that never in my life had I seen a Pokemon cartoon, nor did I know anything about Pokemon. But for some reason, I really found this game compelling. And I'm not speaking just for myself. I'm speaking for people from other generations. My mom was catching Pokemons. My coworkers' grandparents were catching Pokemons as well as their children. So this is a game that, regardless of the theme and regardless of the fact that it was Pokemons, it really transcended generations, and that was really, really interesting. Another couple of things that I found interesting about Pokemon was, first of all, a lot of us assumed that the first applications of augmented reality were going to be done in the business space. No one really predicted that a game, let alone a consumer game, would be the first time that augmented reality would really hit the stage hard as it did. Second of all, it was a really, really social game. I don't know about you guys, but in Seattle, where I'm from, you would often see dozens, if not hundreds of people walking together, chasing Pokemons on the streets, which was not very safe, actually. This game was so popular that it got 550 million downloads and people using it, and no one really predicted it. And that is one of the things that I want to leave you with today, is the fact that technology is unpredictable. The speed of change in which technology is evolving is unpredictable, and it's really hard to find out what's going to happen next. So in 1956, IBM shipped a 5 megabytes hard drive. Does anyone have any idea what that looked like? It was like that. So 5 megabytes is not a lot of storage. Those of us that work on mobile know that 5 megabytes doesn't really get you very far. Yet this machine over here weighed 1 ton. It was 5 megabytes, and it was revolutionary at its time. Corporations would actually rent this machine for about $3,000 a month to be able to use it. And it replaced technology that was hundreds of years old with punch cards. Now, this is technology that first made it into the corporate space, and it wasn't until years later that it got consumerized and used by consumers out there. And actually, about 60 years later, IBM again unveiled the first 7-nanometer chip with 20 billion transistors, and is the size of a fingernail. So you can see how our ability to store data, our ability to process data, is becoming cheaper, and we're able to achieve it in smaller and smaller spaces. And likewise, screens are also getting smaller. This right here may not be surprising to a lot of you. It actually shows that the PC market is shrinking. Is anyone surprised by the fact that less people are buying desktop computers or PC? Probably not, right? I know that myself, I've replaced my PCs at home with portable devices and other things that I can carry more easily. So if people are not buying PCs, my assumption would be that they're maybe buying tablets or smaller devices. Well, if you think that people are buying tablets instead, you're actually wrong. This shows 4 consecutive quarters of declining year-over-year growth in tablet sales. So if people are not using PCs, not using tablets, they must be moving towards smartphones, right? Especially since smartphones are also getting bigger sometimes with phablets. And the reality is that even though smartphone sales are growing, they're actually growing at a slower pace than they were before, which is a little counterintuitive. I think about smartphones and everything that I can accomplish with them and how integral they are to my life, that I couldn't see myself not ever having a smartphone. I actually forgot my parents' cell phone because now I have it stored on my phone. I no longer have to set up meeting points with friends when I meet with them because we can just text when we are in a general vicinity. I can play music. I can take pictures instead of taking notes that I can go and see afterwards so that I don't have to remember things. So PCs are declining, tablets are declining, phones are growing at a slower rate. So what's next? We have wearables now. So this is actually some screenshots of a wearables app that I worked on for Egencia last year. And a very interesting challenge that we have with wearables is that as screens get smaller, our need for presenting content that is relevant is increasing. Because the reality is that you can't fit every single piece of functionality and every piece of content that you have on your mobile application onto a watch. So the need for serving very targeted, very relevant content at the right time is king when it comes to wearables. For this app specifically, we have some simple actions. You can check your itineraries. You can get alerts for where your baggage claim is, whether your flight is delayed. You can request a callback from customer service if you have any problems with your travel, and you can get turn-by-turn directions to your hotel. So screens are getting smaller. Will they disappear? Do we even need screens anymore? We're already seeing this. In China, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Baidu actually partner up, and they have created an intelligent restaurant that has very little staffing from humans. You actually stand in front of a computer, and the computer detects you and who you are. It looks at what they believe to be your gender, your age, and your mood based on your facial expressions, and they're actually able to recommend what they think you may want to eat. So if they think you partied too hard at ITV last night and you're looking a little groggy, they may recommend that you get like a double fried chicken sandwich or something like that. And the reality is that screens help us interact with technologies, but as screens are getting smaller, do we really need them? And will reality be our new interface? And this is actually really interesting because in a screenless environment, we're actually interacting less with the devices and more with the intelligence behind these devices. I think, for example, of when Palm Pilot wanted us to learn a new way of writing so that we could transcribe our thoughts into their device. That didn't really work, right? That's not how we as humans interact. And then you have actions that the iPhone, for example, has taught us how to use. You swipe, you flick, you double tap. Yes, these are movements that are now very integral to how we operate and how our thumbs work, but they're not really natural. They're things that we had to learn. So is there a way to actually interact with technology in a more intuitive way that we don't necessarily have to learn? What are some things that we already know how to do that would potentially allow us to interact with technology easier? How about our voices? So this is the Amazon Echo with Alexa, and it is a magical device. Right out of the box that allows you to do a multitude of features, like playing music, order things through Amazon, asking for what the weather's going to be like when I go to Berlin next week, asking for what's the definition of a certain word, or these kinds of things. But where the power of this device really gets unlocked is by what they call skills. So skills is a way that Amazon has actually opened up their platform to third-party developers so that they can have apps within the Alexa platform. Last year in January, there were 130 things that Amazon Alexa knew how to do based on these third-party developers. That number is now 10,000 a little over a year later, and we're predicting that that's going to be over 50,000 by the end of this year. That really highlights the pace of change and the pace of innovation that we're seeing. And travel is actually not really far behind on this. Expedia, our sister company, is already working with Alexa, and you can ask Alexa about an upcoming travel. You can ask Alexa about additional details for a trip that you're about to take, and you can even rent a car. And that's only the beginning. We're going to continue seeing a lot of developments in this area. I personally have stopped looking at my phone and interacting with it to play music at home, for example. Instead, I just say, hey, Alexa, play Taylor Swift. And she will, because I really like Taylor Swift. And these devices have really taken the world by storm. I actually got 3 for Christmas, so if anyone's looking for one, you can get mine off of eBay. So we are going to see more disruption and more advancements in technology in the near future. That is not contested at all. The pace of innovation is voracious right now. Many times in my life, I've thought, wow, we've really solved it all. Technology is at its peak. And then I continue to be surprised by the amount of innovation that continues to happen. People are not slowing down. Technology is not slowing down. So neither should we in travel. We need to continue adapting and embracing these technologies so that we can survive. And that is not my thought. That's actually Charles Darwin's thought from about 200 years ago. It is not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So if we want to continue surviving, we need to continue adapting and embracing these technologies. Now, the reason you're all here is because you want to know a little bit more about how this fits into the business travel ecosystem. Why am I here as a person who works for business travel? Well, this image is a little bit representative of how business travel used to be run and a lot of the more old school travel management companies. You'll notice how the people in this picture are somewhat anonymous. They are staring at this big piece of technology that's almost imposing. And that's how a lot of these businesses have been run for years. They're very, very company-centric, and they're very focused on reducing cost and maximizing compliance by just forcing and imposing certain things on travelers. So if I needed to come to Berlin, for example, I would call a company that would tell me, this is the cheapest flight, it's the one you have to take. That's not what we expect as consumers, and that's not how it should be. We at Egencia actually believe that in order to drive compliance, we can create really great consumer-like experiences that will drive usage, and with usage will come compliance. Because at the end of the day, business travelers are people too. How many of you guys travel from outside of Berlin to come to this conference? All right, a variety of you. So how many of you interact with Google, Facebook, Amazon on a daily basis? Probably all of you, right? So why should your ability to book travel for business travel be any different than how you interact with technology on a daily basis? These websites that you interact with on a daily basis actually create an expectation from you that everything you do for business as well as for leisure should be intuitive, should be cross-device. You should have choices. At the end of the day, when you travel for leisure with your family, you are doing so by looking at a company like Expedia and searching for all of your options. Why should business travel be any different? Why should we impose what routes you're supposed to take? So the old model is no longer sufficient, and companies just like Egencia are making sure that we're putting business travel at the center of everything that we do, so that we're creating consumer-like experiences. We are so customer-centric that a lot of the features that we build, we actually do not without first doing a lot of research in our usability lab on. We have a usability lab in some of our offices that allow us to see our users interact with prototypes of our products and use eye tracking methodologies to figure out how they're consuming this information, where they're looking on the screen, what's intuitive, what's not intuitive. We also have machines called electromyographs that are basically a set of sensors that hook up to someone's face and allow us to see whether people using prototypes of our product are sensing delight or fear or frustration. And these are some of the methodologies that we use when developing product at Egencia that help us make sure that we're putting the right product in front of people. We also use the scientific method and A/B testing to make sure that at the end of the day, even if we think that a change that we're making on our website and our product is good for the consumer, that we're actually validating that. We actually think that this strategy will play in our advantage because that's actually how technology is already moving. For the longest time, and think about that 1956 5 megabyte, 1 ton computer, we were seeing a lot of innovation come to the corporate space first, and it was geared towards corporations. You had email, for example, you had fax machines, even cell phones that were used by corporations at first. I remember when I was little, I would love going to my dad's office because he had Microsoft Paint in a computer, and I could just sit at his desk and draw circles and lines and then print them. None of those things were things that I could actually do at home. But the reality is that a lot of those technologies are now available to consumers. And because they're available to consumers, a lot of that innovation has actually translated into a lot of consumer-facing products that we interact with on a daily basis. And this is actually turning the tides a little bit, where we're actually seeing a lot of innovation come from consumer side first and then being embraced by corporate. Focusrite predicts that in just 3 years, as we enter a new decade, artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies will likely be embedded in corporate travel. If I were a betting man, I would say that it's probably going to be before 3 years, because we're already starting to see this innovation happen in travel. These are just some of the few things that we're starting to look into. We have natural language processing, like Alexa, for example. I'm really enjoying my time in Berlin, so what if I could tell my Egencia app that I want to extend my travel for a week because I really want to continue exploring Berlin? What if we had chatbots that would really allow us to manage disruption when we have travelers stranded at the airport, so that we could very easily and very timely be able to manage this disruption for our travelers without them having to wait on long queues? Machine learning and smart data to make sure that we're always creating personalized experiences that are relevant. And the thing is that this is one of those things that I actually think that us in business travel are better poised to start playing with than leisure travel is, for a couple of reasons. First of all, the corporate traveler is a little more predictable than the leisure traveler. The fact of the matter is that I travel to Paris twice a year. I always take the same flight. I go to Chicago from Seattle, my hometown, 4 times a year, and I always take the same flight. And I always stay at the same hotels. That amount of predictability makes it really easy for us to start leveraging some of these technologies very quickly. The other reason is that in a corporate travel environment, all of our users are actually logged in. So we have a huge amount of data that we can leverage to be able to understand what is the most relevant thing that we can put in front of customers. Now, should we pick and choose which ones of these we're going to be playing around with? Is one more important than the other one? I don't really know, but I think we probably need to start evaluating and considering all of them. This chart right here is a little convoluted, but it actually explains how people from different generations are choosing or preferring to interact with technology. So at the very far right, you have, for example, my grandparents' generation, not my parents' generation quite, and they prefer using phones for the most part. Maybe not a smartphone, but a big, flip phone. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have millennials that don't really seem to have a defined preference on how they like to interact with technology and those brands around them. It seems to be what's most relevant at the time or easier for them to use. But the reality is that no generation is using one way of interacting with technology alone. It's always more than one way. So we need to continue exploring all of these options as they become available, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're communicating with travelers the way they want to be communicated with. We want our travelers to find us the way they want to find us. That could be a phone, that could be speaking into Alexa, that could be going into our website. So I could not predict that Pokemon Go was going to be a huge success in 2016, and I cannot predict what's going to happen in 2036. What I do know is that in order for us to be relevant, we need to continue exploring these technologies that have been made mainstream by consumers. And while we don't know where technology is going, all I know is that we'll be there in corporate travel. Thank you very much. And I will be in the hallway right on the other side of this wall, answering any questions people may have. So thanks again for your time and for showing up.
Thank you very much.